Hey everyone, welcome back to the WinUI community call. I'm Anna. For those that don't know me, I'm a PM on the WinUI team, and I host our monthly community calls. I know we haven't seen you all in a while, so it's good to be back, and we've got a great call, so I'm just going to get right into it. So a little bit more about the community call. They usually take place on the third Wednesday of every month at 9 a.m. Pacific. Obviously, today's not the third Wednesday. We moved this call to make some space for the Windows 11 event that happened last week. If you haven't heard about that event, definitely go check out some videos. Lots of great stuff to catch up on. Our next call will be on July 21st. In the meantime, you can always find us on GitHub or Twitter if you have questions or just things to tell us. So for today's call, I'm going to be starting off with our intro. I'm going to be passing it off to a couple folks from the WinUI 2 team for a deep dive on WinUI 2.6. Then some folks from the WinUI 3 team are going to be talking about our release channels, our roadmap, and also some updates to our dev experience. And of course, we will do some Q&A at the end. So a little bit of an intro here. What is WinUI? WinUI is the native UI platform for Windows 10 and Windows 11. So it's built for today's modern hardware and devices. It offers the latest Fluent styling. You can use WinUI to build rich .NET and C++ apps for modern Windows devices. WinUI also powers the Windows and Xbox OS shell and many apps, as well as platforms like .NET MAUI and React Native for Windows. So there are two generations of WinUI. WinUI 2 is the second generation of the native UX stack in Windows. It's built for UWP apps. WinUI 2 consists of the scene graph layer and the XAML framework in the operating system, as well as a library of Fluent-based controls and styles that update around trimesterly. WinUI 3 is a new third generation of this native UX stack in Windows. It consolidates the UX technologies previously built into Windows into a single decoupled framework that ships as a part of the Windows App SDK, which is previously known as Project Reunion. So let's get right into it. Let's talk about WinUI 2.6 and what's new. Today we have Ranjesh, who is the engineering lead for WinUI 2, and Chigusa, who is a principal program manager on the WinUI 2 team as well. And they are going to be walking us through all of the new styles and visuals for the WinUI 2 controls, a couple of new controls that we're debuting in this release, and some new features and APIs. So Chigusa, why don't you go ahead and share your screen and we can get started.
Okay, let me share my screen. Let me see. Tell me when you see the desktop background.
Okay, I see it. We are good to go.
Okay, so let me get myself situated. So my name is Chigusa Sansen. Today I'd like to share with you what we recommend you to do to your app to make your app feel at home in Windows 11. And much of this information is available here on this page. And this page actually have more information than WinUI, so please take a look. But this is a WinUI community presentation, so I'm going to stick with WinUI. And also, I'm going to use XAML controls gallery that we shipped in store just recently, which uses WinUI 2.6 to explain what those styles are. So first thing that you notice when we launched WinUI, XAML controls gallery, is that you see this material called mica. Mica is a very performant material, unlike acrylic that many of you probably are already familiar with. And mica is performant because it samples the desktop background only once. So you can use them on long-lived surfaces like title bar and app background. And that's what we recommend exactly. Mica is meant to communicate the active and the inactive state of the app. So if I were to click on this web, you can see that the mica turns on and off to show you that it's active or inactive. And also, for those of you who have been asking, what about acrylic? Acrylic is still very much alive. We still recommend you to use it on things like transient surfaces. So the guidance for acrylic hasn't really changed. We recommend you continue using to communicate your UI is transient using acrylic, but use the mica on the longer-lived surfaces. Another thing you notice is layering. we integrated this new layering design, which we are recommending 2 layering system in Windows 11. Here you see the base layer that uses Mica, and this is app's foundation. It's the bottommost layer of every app and contains controls like navigation, view, and commanding. Let me close this one. And content layer helps users focus on your content because that's more important to your app. Another thing that you notice is the rounded window. We are rounding the window corners to be 8 pixel, and then controls in the content is having 4 pixel rounding. And let me show you an example of another app. So calendar view actually rounded the corners to be circular. I think this looks really nice. We also rounded all of the other controls, but I wanted to show you the list view control, which again rounded the corners to 4 pixels. And you can see that this delight animation going on. But what you notice here is that I have 2 things selected, but they don't touch each other because we inserted those selections and hover states so that they don't touch each other, because when they touch each other and the corner is rounded, it doesn't look very nice. And this is what we call a T rule. So if you see down here that these UIs are touching each other and it's creating an upside down T, in this case, we recommend that you don't round the corners because they do not look nice. And let me see. And the next thing that I want to show you is the light and dark mode. So you can see here that the color is slightly different from what you might be used to. We changed the color scheme so that we are not using the pure white and pure black background, so that the colors are softer on your eyes. And it also helps you with the shadow, because shadows are black and it doesn't really show nicely on the dark background especially. So the colors are different. And also I wanted to switch back to the light theme and tell you that all those colors on light themes are also changed horizontally. Another thing that you notice is the iconography. We introduced Sego Fluent icon font, which has much rounder geometry to match with the rounded corners. And this, for those of you who's following Fluent design, these are in alignment with the Fluent icons that you might have been seeing. Another change that you should be aware of is typography. We introduced new system font called Sego UI Variable. For those of you who are familiar with the font technology, Sego UI Variable, which is a variable font, gives you more flexibility in defining the weight. We also turn on optical size on by default. What that means is that text in a smaller size are much more legible, but text in the larger size doesn't blow up to be too big, and it's very proportional, so your UI can be tighter. In my opinion, our design team did a great job in keeping the front footprint of the font the same, so that your UI is not impacted, your UI layout is not impacted when you're using most common font sizes like 14 pixels. So that you can run the same UI on Windows 11 as well as on down-level OS, which we recommend, because WinUI handles all the downgrade behaviors, like font is not there, then we'll fall back to the Sego UI, or icon not there, a mica not there, all those things are degraded properly. The last but not least, I want to show you animated icons. We introduced animated icons to add delight to our UI. And using animated icon, you can take advantage of lorry animations from your UI. And we recommend you consider using micro animation, which communicate to the user that your UI is being hovered, clicked, released, that gives confidence to the user that your UI was successfully interacted. So here we have it, a very high-level view of Windows 11 UI change that we would like for you to consider for your app. Thank you.
All right, awesome. Thanks so much, Chigusa. This is, it's so exciting. Everything looks so good. Ranjesh, do you want to go ahead and share your screen and talk about some of our new controls? All right, I see your screen is up. Yep, we are good to go if you want to start presenting.
Hi, everyone. Very excited to share a few new controls that we're adding for WinUI 2.6. Let me start with just try out XAML Controls Gallery. It looks great. It's been updated with the new styles, and I think it looks awesome. So definitely go give it a try. It's in the store, and you can install it right now. So for the first control, I want to show Expander. This has been a community request for a long time, and it's finally here. You can see nice animations. Like like Chigusa mentioned, we've got the subtle colors and the nice animations. And we currently support down and up directions, so you can kind of like expand downwards or up depending on your scenario. And of course, we support custom content in the header as well as the content. Yeah, I just love switching the theme here. So that transition, I just love that. And like obviously, you can see that in the dark theme here. Moving on, we also have a new breadcrumb control. So if you're having navigation type scenarios where you want to leave a breadcrumb of like where you are in the navigation steps, this is really useful. And we take care of kind of doing this crumbling behavior. Like, so if you're kind of out of space, then the crumbs start pooling to the left, and you have an overflow menu here, which kind of looks really good. All right. Another control that I want to call out is pips pager. So this is, you've probably seen this UI. This is like something that you can use to index collections. And so in here, what you're seeing is a flip view hooked up to a pips pager. And it's really pretty much this code here. You just give it the number of pages and the selected page, which is done through a binding here. And that makes it just work out of the box here, which is pretty cool. A couple of things that pips pager supports. We have a vertical orientation, so you can kind of like have it horizontal or vertical, and visibility. So you can say, hey, make it visible only when the pointer is over it, and you can see that like the arrows become visible when you mouse over. The top arrow is not showing because there's nothing to move there, but once you move to the next pip, you can kind of see that one showing up there. Let me see. I think that's pretty much one of the other things that I wanted to show was animated icons. Animated icons are everywhere, as Chigusa mentioned, and we also have image icon and a few other APIs that we've added to help expose like image sources as icons. So that's pretty exciting. So I hope you give XAML Controls Gallery a try. I hope you give WinUI 2.6 a try. I know we've been hearing a ton of feedback. Review, keep that coming. We'll fix the bugs and get this going. Thank you.
Awesome.
Back to you.
All right, cool. Yeah, it's so great to see all these new controls. I think Pips Pager is probably my favorite, partly because of the name, but also just because it's really cool. So I'm going to go ahead and share my PowerPoint back to our Teams call. And Chigusa, I believe you are going to speak over a couple of our docs here.
Sorry, I was hunting for the screen.
No
Okay,
worries.
Let me turn on my camera. Hello, everybody. Yes, so I wanted to share with you all the links that we have. So as you are all probably familiar with, we have release notes for WinUI 2.6. And we have brand new design documentation that you can visit and learn about things like mica and rounded corners and things that I just talked about. And also we have a brand new design toolkit that you can learn about all the styles, color values, and things like that. That is very massive. Go check it out. It's a Figma community. You can duplicate and then you can use for your application. And we would love for you to help us improve WinUI 2.6 and 2.7 and in the future. So there are some things that we would like to ask you to do. So please continue using Feedback Hub for general Windows 11 issues and requests. But please use GitHub issues for WinUI bugs and feature requests. And this is new this week. We have introduced new issues for WinUI Design Toolkit and Figma bugs and feature requests. So if you have some issues with the Design Toolkit, please open bugs in GitHub. When you do that, please keep following things in mind. Please be nice when you're commenting on a very subjective matter, because these are very subjective. Styles are very subjective. So something that you might think might not be agreed upon by everybody else. So let's talk about those things in a nice way. Please use examples when you make suggestions so that we know exactly what you mean. And the next bullet is also the same, but please make sure that your points are clear. We will ask you questions to make sure that we understand your issues and help us understand. And it really helps when your issue is one per item. When you include multiple issues in one, it gets a little bit complicated for us to understand what issue you're trying to raise. So if you could please create one issue per item, that really helps us. If you need to talk about multiple things to explain your issue, then please do so with some note that you know that this is bucket issue, so that we know that you are raising several issues in one. And also, another thing is that it's sometimes helpful for you to help us understand the issue rather than give us a suggestion in the beginning, because it's possible that the way that we solve might not be how you suggest. So for example, if there is some issues with the UI contrast, instead of saying, please make this darker, it might be better for you to say, there is a contrast issue here, please solve. Because it might be that we solve it in some other way than making color changes. So let's work together to make WinUI great. And I'm very excited to working with you in the community.
Awesome. Thanks, Chigusa. All right, I'm going to switch over to the next slide. Let me put my video on here. So recently shipped as well is Windows App SDK 0.8. What's new? First off, the name. Project Reunion is now officially called the Windows App SDK. And as most of you know, WinUI 3 ships as a part of the Windows App SDK. So this latest release is stable and it's suited for production desktop apps that you can ship to the Microsoft Store. It includes tons of new bug fixes, including many that were filed on GitHub by community members like you. At some of the links here, you can find our full list of bug fixes. If you filed a bug that was fixed in this release, you should have received a comment on the issue, and I probably closed it. But if you're curious to see all the bugs, we have a list here. In addition to that, we also have instructions on how to upgrade your app to get the latest release, or you can just create a new app with the latest release as well, and we have instructions for those in our official docs. So yeah, really exciting stuff in 0.8. Next up, I am going to talk a little bit about our release channels. So now that we've shipped 0.8, our next release is likely going to be the 1.0 experimental release. And starting with this release, we're adopting a new system of release channels. So there are going to be 3 separate release channels that have varied feature sets and also ship at different times and at different frequencies. So we have the stable, preview, and experimental channel. The stable channel is exactly what it sounds like. It supported stable APIs and features that you can use in production apps. We expect to ship stable releases no faster than every 4 months. In between that, we expect to ship servicing releases if necessary to these stable releases. The second channel is our preview channel. This is similar to a release candidate channel. It provides a preview of the next stable release. So there may still be breaking API changes between the preview channel and the stable channel, but it should be mostly there. For these, we are targeting monthly. That's a goal for our team, not necessarily, something set in stone. As for experimental, these are features that are in early stages of development. So experimental features may be removed from the next release or they may never be released. There's no kind of guarantee that experimental features are making it into the next stable release. But for this channel, we are also targeting a monthly release. So let's see what's next. For our release channels, I also wanted to go over our standards internally, how we decide kind of the bar for which features and which updates can go into which channel. So once again, we have experimental, preview, and stable. In terms of functionality, for the experimental channel, it needs to be at least somewhat functional. For preview, we say it needs to be 97% there, maybe a few small bugs that are still getting fixed, but the feature needs to work. Stable should be 100% there. As for the stability of the APIs, experimental, we're not making any promises as to the stability of those features. Preview should be near stable. Once again, maybe a few little changes happening, but it should be almost there. Stable, stable API. For documentation, for our experimental release, we aim to have at least an API spec or a GitHub issue or some kind of example that you as our community can use to work off of if you're going to be using this feature. We don't want to put out any features that are just not documented at all. For the preview release, we expect to have at least a preview of the primary docs experience, either an API reference doc or a conceptual doc published on the official Microsoft Docs site. As for the stable release, you can expect to see, full-blown conceptual and API reference docs. As for samples, it's pretty similar to docs, not required for experimental releases. For previews, we require a preview of the sample, and for stable releases, a sample is required. And as for ship date, so experimental, as I said before, you have no guarantees to be in the upcoming stable release. For preview features, you have to be confident that a feature is going to ship in the upcoming stable release. And as you can see in the bottom, to ship in a stable release, you must be in at least one preview release before going stable. So we want to make sure that everything that goes in stable kind of gets some extra eyes on it, allows you as our community to test out these features, and just, really get them thoroughly tested before we put them in our stable channel. So next up, we have, I believe we have Ryan, who is going to talk a little bit more about our roadmap. Let me just get through these animations. Ryan, if you just want to start speaking here about our roadmap.
Yep, got it. So this is an updated roadmap, just kind of showing both WinUI 2 and our plans for WinUI 3. And then in the next slide, I'll also talk a little bit more about some of the WinUI 3 specific things that we're focused on. But essentially, and as Anna mentioned, we just shipped the Windows App SDK 0.8 that had a version of WinUI 3 in it that was largely focused around sort of fixes and stability improvements. And I got to say, as a community, we've just really appreciated all of sort of the bugs that you've been able to identify, that our team has been able to seize upon and fix. And there's really a long list and a long backlog of those. We're trying to chew through those, but the response has been really great. So thanks so much for finding those. It allows us to, try and shore up and solidify the features we've already shipped before we spend a lot of time trying to add new features as well, and just making sure that we try and maintain a good and stable product. So the next big stop for us is going to be in Q4 of this year. That's going to be the Windows App SDK 1.0. For those that maybe haven't been tuning into these community calls or just don't remember sort of our versioning sort of scheme for the Windows App SDK. We're trying to follow Zemver versioning rules, which means once we ship a 1.0, then the APIs will become stable. We're not going to be breaking those APIs until we do a 2.0 sometime in the future, in a sort of reasonably far off future. So 1.0 is going to be kind of like a reasonably big event, just in terms of like, hey, you know, we've reached this sort of level of like API stability. And our intention is to have WinUI 3 have parity basically with whatever exists in WinUI 2. So we're going to be doing a WinUI 2.7, and we don't have the exact date and whether or not that's going to be sort of simultaneously released with the 1.0 App SDK, or whether or not that'll be a thing that comes later, sometime sort of like in earlier 2022. So we're still sort of sorting out the time frame for 2.7. But if 2.7's out, then we'll make sure that WinUI 3 has those capabilities. And if it's not yet out, we'll at least make sure that all the 2.6 stuff that we just released last week is all included in there as well. So I think that pretty much covers this one, Anna. You can probably move on to the next slide. And just in terms of like, okay, well, what are we focusing on in WinUI 3? And you know, this outlines the main things that we're focusing on. I guess maybe one bullet that I didn't put on here was, you know, the ever-going and ongoing fixes and stability improvements that we're always trying to make. So, you know, I think the team certainly has to always be balancing like, okay, let's make sure that we address the issues that the community is finding in the stuff that have already come out, but also let's try and advance and create new capabilities. And there's quite a pretty long list here of new capabilities, as you can see, of things we want to get to. As mentioned, we want to get to parity with 2.6 and make sure we get all that those cool, awesome new like styles and features brought over. But there's a bunch of sort of like bread and butter stuff that we want to get to that we've been talking about for quite some time. So the ability to do unpackaged app deployment. So you don't require MSIX, for example. That's something that we want to focus on moving forward in the coming months. Also, in-app, or maybe I don't really know the best way to say this, but you know, framework package list deployment. Basically, a mode where you know you truly own 100% of the deployment and servicing of WinUI. There would be no bits at all, not even sort of bug fixes that would change under you. There are some customers that are really interested in this capability. We actually don't recommend it generally. The whole sort of way that the Windows App SDK works is that you get to pick what version you target, but then if there are like critical bug fixes, we can service those through a framework package. That's definitely the default. It's what our tooling will point to. It's the recommended path. But we want to have an option for people who really, truly want to just fully take over the bits and really own that servicing. And so that's another thing that we'll be focusing on. The ability to create top-level windows on the same thread. Separate thread will likely be post 1.0. .NET 6 is a huge event that's coming in November, and so we want to make sure that we have support for that as well. We want to move to a single project developer experience, and this will really just you know, improve the inner loop and just make it you know, cleaner and more straightforward and more performant in the developer experience. And Miguel Ramos is going to talk a little bit about developer experience stuff here in a minute as well on this call. So there's more on that. XAML Islands, I know that there was a lot of discussion about that early in the chat on this call. We do want to make XAML Islands a focus area for this year. And I guess this would be a good point to sort of call out the note that I wrote at the top, which is, you know, all of these capabilities that we focus on, we're going to start by introducing them in the experimental channel, and many of them, but probably not all of them, will reach stable by 1.0. So Anna did a really great job of trying to like outline all these different channels that we're going to use, so that there's maybe a more graduated system of stability and getting feedback just in general for all the technologies in the Windows App SDK. What we're hoping to do is to have Islands initial capabilities experimental by 1.0. I don't think that we'll get to a stable point for 1.0. That'll probably be like maybe a 1.1 thing or sometime after that where we manage to get that stable, because XAML Islands is a very complex feature. We also know it's very necessary for people. Most of the development that's done on Windows is done in apps that have already been written. We have good data on that, and so you've invested all this time and effort into these WPF, WinForms, MFC type apps, and you want to be able to go and incrementally improve those apps, tapping into like all the awesomeness that WinUI provides, and that's exactly what Islands does. But there's quite a lot of work under the hood that's needed to really get that right. So hopefully experimental. There'll be other improvements that we want to do in the scene graph layer. I haven't really talked about like scene graph. I usually call that the visual layer, but a lot of my fine colleagues have corrected me, saying like actually it's not just about visuals, it's about input. And indeed, we've got some improvements that we want to do to how input is handled and some of the APIs there as well. So that'll be yet another focal point for this year. So those are the main areas that the team is focused on. We've picked that set. For a lot of different reasons, trying to align with .NET 6, trying to listen to the community, trying to really get some really critical stuff like unpackaged support and XAML islands, get the ball rolling on those things and get them to a place where you can rely on them. And once we sort of have this feature set more finalized and have an even better understanding of like what channels these will be out and when, we'll update our public roadmap. So I hope that brings some clarity to sort of how we're focusing the rest of the year.
All right, thanks a lot, Ryan. I believe, our last content for today's call is going to be a demo with Miguel, all about what's new in the developer experience. So, Miguel, let me know when you're ready to share.
Sure, Anna. I'm going just to share my desktop. Meanwhile, Anna, I'm super happy today, not only because all this Windows 11 or Windows App SDK 0.8 stuff, is because I'm going to be on vacation for a couple of weeks. So,
yay!
Super happy. All right. I think I'm sharing right now.
Yep, you're good to go.
Oh, the first thing is shame on me. I'm the only one who is not using Windows 11. I'm sorry. I was trying just to repro a bug on Windows 10 and I didn't have time to switch the laptop. But hey, so you can install Windows 11 inside the release right now, so go for it. Let's see what we have for today. Let me open my to-do list. We have like 4 points to talk about. The first one is about the Visual Studio SAML diagnostics. Yeah, this is about bad news and good news. The bad news is unfortunately, WinUI 3 toolings such as Live Visual Tree, Live Property Explorer, and Hot Reload are currently no support for the Windows App SDK 0.8 release. There was a tooling regression because of some necessary breaking changes, but hey, the good news is we are working on it, and you can expect to see these tools back again in the Visual Studio 2019 11 Preview 3. So that means the next update of Visual Studio 2019. So this is done. The second one is about what happened with Visual Studio 2022. I know for sure that there is a lot of people who want to start to playing with the Project Reunion, Windows App SDK with Visual Studio 2022. And the good news is we are working on a version that is going to work in this Visual Studio 2022. So we need to modify some NuGets and basics that we are generating in our pipelines. So we can get a version mid-July that is going to work with that, so we can share these basics project templates with you. So this is another update. As Ryan was talking about, we are going to switch a little the way that we are deploying applications. As you know, WinUI 3 apps require to be packaged using the MSIX. For instance, let me go to this project here. So you see every time that you create a project for WinUI 3, you will see a couple of things. One thing is the application project, another one is the packaging project. We are working on a tool that will allow you to removing the packaging project and enable that the application, this project, can be packaged directly. So it's no longer required that. So the tool right now is experimental, and it worked with the Windows App SDK 0.8. For instance, if you go to the extensions, install here, I already have this tool called Single Project MSIS Packaging Tools. This is, again, this is experimental. It's not meant to be for production environments. There is several scenarios that still are not working, but it is there just to allow to you to play a little. The good news about that is, as I said before, right now we have these two projects. We are going to just enable that you can just remove one project, and you will see things like that. Let me switch around, because this is the same project, removing the packaging project. So one thing that you will see is all the package information is going to be in your application project. Some resources like images for the packaging is going to be as well in your project. You will need just to set up some kind of properties in your pro. For instance, this enable preview MSIS tooling, which is something temporary, because the idea is to have all these experiences as the default one. This experience is also the one who is going to enable that you can select when you want your application be packaged or unpackaged. Something that, as Ryan said before, is something that we are aiming to support in the version in V1. This is the classic sample that we are presenting several times this year about the ebook reader. So just clicking just to making sure that it's working, and I'm not lying to you. That's the cool app. Nice. So we was talking about a single project. Let's talk about something very cool, the Windows Template Studio. Let me go here. So during several years, we, Microsoft and the community, of course, helps to ship a standalone tool to accelerate the creation of apps for WPF and UWP using some kind of wizard experience, something like that. This is the Windows Template Studio. In the last month, we updated Windows Template Studio to support Windows 3, WinUI 3 apps with the version 4.1. So let's see how this works. So I'm going to Visual Studio, open a new instance of Visual Studio. Come on, Visual Studio, you can do it. You can do it better. Is in here. I'm going to create a new project. Once that I install the Windows Template Studio, you can filter by Windows Template Studio. You can get a lot of templates in here. The new template, for instance, is going to be this WinUI 3 in desktop. That you can recognize that it's the Windows Template Studio because it has this label. And click there, go next, whatever. Create this name, and you will see this wonderful user experience using this wizard. We expanded the template that we already have in the Windows App SDK 0.8 with more types of templates. For instance, this is the blank app, similar exactly to the one that we have today in the Windows App SDK. But we already have in here blank buttons, navigation pane, more like the menu bar. So it means that, hey, if you want to set up an app with the navigation pane, so just select this navigation, click next, and you will see that we also allow to you to use some MVVM toolkits. Just for instance, we are using the community toolkit for the MVVM, this implementation, which is super cool. Let me just click on there. And here we are. You can see a lot of pages that you can create with the project, even before just to even before they create the project. So for instance, you have blank app settings with view, these details, because everything is free. So let's add in one of them. You can also create more than one for each one and rename the page, all this stuff. Let's click next. So you will see that, hey, we can set up some information in the storage of your app to just to keep the state of your app. We are selecting in the MSIS packaging project, but in the future, you can unselect that when we support unpackaged applications. Theme selection, you can switch between dark and light. We are doing all this work for you. When you click in create, it's going to generate a lot of code. So I'm not going to click there because it's going to take like a couple of minutes. I want to save your time. So let me go back, and you will see here that this is the code that we generated. This bunch of source code that we generate, we are following the model view model pattern because it's the one that we already selected. So you can see all the view models, all the views, and we are applying solid principle. For instance, you can see in here a lot of dependency injection and so forth. So everything was done with just 5 clicks, which is great. Let me just click in here just to show you what you're going to see when you are running this app. It's loading the symbols. And this is the main page. You can see a web view page as well. You can see in here some content grid, more stuff about data grid. This is about a list. You can also switch the themes because you selected that in the page. Go back. Hey, you have all this code following the good principles, helping to you to accelerate the creation of any kind of WinUI 3 apps using the Windows Template Studio 4. So this is wonderful. Let me go back to my to-do list. It's done. Anna.
All right. Thank you, Miguel. That is awesome. It's so cool to see the whole app being built with just a few clicks. Very cool. Now let's move into some Q&A. I'll set us up here in Together mode in Teams. Let's see if I remember how to do that. Here we go. If everyone on the WinUI team wants to turn on your video, and Miguel, if you want to stop sharing,
I'll do
get
that
this
right
going.
now. Sorry.
No worries.
Done.
All right. Q&A, we're here. All right, looks like we got a couple faces popping up here. Savoy, if you want to get us started, we could start answering some questions.
Sure thing, Anna. Is my audio coming through all right?
Yep, all good.
Awesome. All right, so the first thing I wanted to touch on is the integration of WinUI 2 controls and their styling into WinUI 3. Seems like there's a lot of questions on this in chat. Ryan, I figure you might be the right person to touch on this a little bit.
Yeah, I'd be happy to, and Ranjesh, you can jump in with anything that you want to jump in as well. And I apologize if I didn't make it clear earlier. So right now, the sort of like the Windows 11 styling, like all the cool styles, a lot of the new controls and stuff like that exist in WinUI, they've largely first have existed and first have shipped it in WinUI 2.6, and that came out last week. So if you're a WinUI 2 developer using WinUI 2 today, update to 2.6, you'll get a lot of that awesomeness. We haven't had time to integrate that yet into WinUI 3. Our intention is to focus on that actually very soon, like in the coming weeks. And so you'll start to see experimental builds and then ultimately a 1.0 release in Q4 of the Windows App SDK that has brought us up to where that WinUI 2 capability already is in terms of those controls and styles. So I hope that that's clear. So the answer is literally today, the new several of the new controls and the new styles are not yet present in WinUI 3. They're coming very soon, and we want to go and unlock that for all WinUI 3 folks as well. So that's absolutely a top priority thing that we want to go and focus on. And I don't know if Ranjesh, if you have any other stuff to add there.
I think you covered it really well, Ryan. You hit it on the point. Like we just ran out of time, so we're done with 2.6, and we're going to take it and merge it into 3.
Yep, not far around the corner. Savoy, you're muted.
Thank you. I'm not too far away from a a daycare right now happening upstairs, so I'm trying to keep my mic off between questions. Chigusa, a question for you. It's on the subject of mica. So we have people asking, in what scenarios will mica be practically used for in XAML applications? Is it a replacement for background acrylic, or is it some other kind of styling? I figured that might be a subject you'd like to talk to a bit.
Yeah, so I mentioned this briefly in the part I talked, but mica is a new additional material to acrylic. Acrylic is still there. We recommend you use it for the transient surfaces, like I mentioned, menu flyouts, auto-suggest flyouts type, and use the mica on long-lived surfaces like the background or title bar, because that's supposed to communicate the active nature of your app, active and inactive. It turns on and off.
Awesome. Thanks, Chigusa. All right. Next question here. I'll send it Mike's way. Mike, how much testing has been done to ensure WinUI 3's and the Windows App SDK will ultimately work properly when targeting Windows ARM64?
For WinUI 3 in particular, we've got a lot of automated tests, and we run the automated tests on all the architectures, x86, 64, ARM64. There's no plan for ARM32, but we've got automated testing for ARM64. Most of the work to get that set up was just in the just getting the tools and the build process set up. But overall, we've had very, very few. I don't remember any architecture-specific bugs, so we're testing at it, but so far we haven't had a lot of issues.
Excellent. All right. Next question I'll throw over to Ryan. Ryan, there's a lot of comments about UWP no longer being present on the roadmap, and our viewers are interested in the state of UWP overall.
I'll probably answer more directly toward the roadmap and what sort of our WinUI 3 plans are, and I'll try and touch on this more broadly too. So, yeah, the reason we pulled it from our roadmap, and that's specifically from the table for WinUI 3, is that at this time we don't have any plans to move that from experimental to GA. Our focus is really on trying to reach out to the existing very large community of Win32 desktop developers who really haven't had any good way to go and access a lot of the great innovations that are done in Fluent Design and a lot of the controls that WinUI has traditionally provided. So our focus is really primarily geared around that. We are still investing in WinUI 2 and will be for quite a while. I've mentioned this at quite a few conferences and presentations that I've done, and I'll just reiterate it here. We'll be doing a WinUI 2.7, we'll be doing a 2.8, we'll be doing a 2.9, and then we'll run out of numbers and we'll have to figure out what we're going to do. And so that investment is going to continue. And UWP continues to be a recommended path for certain types of apps. I would say if you just want to focus primarily on the Windows desktop and really want to make mainly a Windows desktop app, and you want to, potentially bring other libraries with you that you've used for years that don't run inside the sandbox, you don't care about Xbox, you have WinUI 3 has the feature set that you want. I think making a Windows App SDK app that uses WinUI 3 is a great path, and I would definitely recommend exploring and taking that path. But there are people who don't fall into that category who are perfectly happy with UWP. Maybe they want to go and target other devices like Xbox. Making a UWP app in that situation is also great. We're investing in both technologies, so that's hopefully adds some clarity there.
Awesome. All right. So another question for you, Ryan, while we're on the subject. It seems that the new styles will only be available in WinUI 3 with the Windows App SDK 1.0. To some viewers, this seems a little late, and they're curious if there are any plans to bring it to WinUI earlier so that they can try it with their apps.
The two yeses. Yes, I think it is late. I think it would have been really nice to have that in for 0.8, but just weren't able to get that done in time. And also, yes, we would like to get it into earlier builds, and I think we will. So we have, like as Anna mentioned, with the various channels, the experimental, preview, and release channels, We're going to be doing experimentals on a monthly basis. So it is confusing here. In the past, when WinUI actually wasn't even a part of the Windows App SDK, we were sort of like a standalone thing that was shipping. We basically had effectively two channels. We had a preview channel and then what you might call a stable channel. But we were pretty much just in the mode of only doing previews. So we shipped like preview. We shipped a couple alphas. We shipped.
Hey, Ryan, I think I can't hear you anymore.
I'm sorry. I accidentally hit my space bar, and that apparently mutes you.
All right.
So I learned something here. Or maybe that's just where focus was. Anyway, sorry. I don't know exactly where I cut out there. I'm very
like 10 seconds ago.
Oh, okay, great. So you didn't lose too much then. So with the new channels now, experimental is kind of like what preview was. So if you had like a preview, WinUI 3 preview 1 or preview 2, you know, if you've been with us for this journey for a while, you remember those previews. And if you use those, that's kind of like what the experimental channel is now. It's basically just shipping the very latest of what we've developed. It's not completely stable. It's definitely not recommended to be used in some sort of a production app, but you get to go and see the latest stuff. And so you'll start to see the work that we do to go and bring these new styles and controls into WinUI 3 in an experimental in the lead up to Q4, into the Q4 release. So I don't have a specific month yet. We're still sort of working out our staging plan, but that's where you'll get to see it first. So like the answer is yes, we will probably actually release it before we do the 1.0. But the next stable train that you can start building production apps on will be that 1.0 release.
Awesome. All right, let me turn it over to Chigusa for a bit. Matt Lacey was asking, given that style and design opinions are subjective, as Chigusa acknowledged, how are decisions related to major UI changes made?
Yes. So although I said it's subjective, we have a design team who looks at the visual design across the UI surfaces that works with many other teams across the company to make sure that things are consistent. And also, I want to mention that there is a page on Windows 11 design principles. So we follow principles to make sure those things that we promise are achieved. So like effortless, calm, personal, familiar, complete, and coherent is what the principles are. So when we look at the designs, we make sure that it's true to that nature. And also, we work closely with that design desire and technology feasibility, because not everything is possible. We also take things like accessibility rules and familiarity from the previous Windows OS users very seriously. So for example, we took design inspiration for the content dialog that we changed. We made it a two-tone. That comes from the idea of Win32 having that separated content and command layer. So we are trying to bring some familiarity over as well. So like I said, it's subjective, but there are a lot of non-subjective work that goes on under the cover.
Awesome. Thanks, Chigusa. Ryan, we had a great quick question from Matt Lacey on clarification. He's asking to clarify what we mean when we refer to a Win32 desktop app. Does that include WPF and WinForms?
Yes, it does. The way that I think about it, which I think is probably too crude, so maybe Mike Hilberg, you can come in, swoop in, and correct me if I say something dumb here, but I kind of think of it as like not in the sandbox, not in app container. That's the way that I often think about it. Or like, you know, all the stuff that came before UWP maybe is sort of another way to say it. That might not be completely precise because UWP is a lot of things. It's a promise of device universality. It's app container. It's often mentally tied with the store, even though maybe it shouldn't be because you can put other types of apps in the store. So I know that's a very overloaded term, but when I refer to sort of like desktop or Win32 apps, I include WPF, I include WinForms, and it's really basically just like an app with a WinMain that just boots up and your process is just running like it has for 30 years.
Yeah, we've been having a lot of debate about the word desktop for Win32, like trying to land a single name.
Yeah.
Haven't quite landed that yet. And another thing that gets caught up in all these discussions, which makes it kind of confusing, is package apps versus unpackaged apps. So UWP is running in the app container, a little bit different than Sandbox. That's been kind of confusing too. There's a Windows Sandbox feature, which is different. But UWP apps run in the app container and they're packaged. So when we talk about desktop apps, we're talking about WinUI today, the WPF, any old 20-year-old app. But it can also be a package app, and if it's a package app, it it lights up the MS app deployment and the capabilities that it has.
Awesome. All right. Moving forward here, Miguel, a question for you. Is XAML Island still on the roadmap for WinUI 3 1.0?
Is in the roadmap for making progress. As Ryan said before, we don't know if we are going to be able to achieve a stable version for 1.0 yet. We will share more information maybe in the next community call. So we need to close some engineering tasks.
Yeah, just to add to what Miguel said and to echo what I mentioned earlier, we think stable for 1.0 is like quite unlikely or probably not going to happen. What we're really aiming for is experimental. We want to have an experimental capability by the end of the year in Islands, so that then you, as the community, can play with it, try and integrate that into your apps, give us feedback, because it is, I don't know, maybe the most complex feature of all the features that we're trying to build. Probably, I think it's probably the most technologically complex, and so it's going to take some turns of the crank to get it right.
Yeah, I think the complexity is one of the top that we have right now.
Yeah, very, very, very complicated feature because it has to integrate into apps that have been under development for like 20 years with their own message pumps and the way that they do stuff. Like it is a complex feature, very, very complex.
Awesome. Since we're getting down to 4 minutes here, I'm going to get a little creative with the ordering to try and prioritize some high-value questions. Ryan, someone is asking if anyone can talk about the future of Pivot now that it's back in WinUI 3.
Yeah, great question. So Pivot, it's like this was before I went on vacation for like a month, and that was all sort of like hot just before I went there. So yeah, we brought Pivot back in. Basically, what we did when we brought Pivot back in was we recognized, well, we shouldn't have yanked it out in the way that we did. We brought it back in, and we asked Catherine Yang, who's PM on our team, to go and drive that conversation forward. Now, it's not being driven forward with what I would say like a lot of high priority, mainly because our priorities have been around all the Windows 11 work that we're doing, or a lot of the stuff that you saw in WinUI 3 and the new capabilities that we're trying to boot up. So I wouldn't call it something that we're trying to make a lot of rapid progress on. I think I would more characterize it as we shouldn't have just ripped it out. We brought it back. We're going to get to it in the time that we get to it, and we'll handle it on GitHub in that issue. That really basically Catherine will be sort of driving on a background thread. I think that's probably the best way to describe it.
Awesome. Let's see what else.
Until we figure that out, it's there for you. Just to be clear, so like you can use it.
All right. Question for Ranjesh. Someone is asking, will navigation view support a carousel rather than the overflow dropdown?
Yeah, I think that's an interesting idea. Like Chigusa mentioned, we have a design team who has very specific thoughts and designs. And currently, we have the overflow, and there aren't any plans to update that. So.
All right. Another question for Ryan. Will it be possible for UWP apps to run outside of the sandbox?
Yeah, so given how I defined UWP as like the defining feature of it to me is the sandbox, I would say it doesn't compile. I think of like that as like one of the defining characteristics of it. So I don't know what it means to pull it out. Mike, if you want to jump in and say something.
And you did UWP also runs on Xbox, so might be referring to that, but
maybe, yeah. Okay,
no
sure, yeah. There's I guess maybe a few ways you could interpret that question. Like another way that you could think of it is like, is there a plan to like take just existing UWP apps that are used to running in the sandbox and just magically make them not run in the sandbox or something? No, we don't have any plans like that. Our focus is largely around that Win32 desktop space from a WinUI 3 and Windows App SDK perspective, and we're really trying to just get to the point where people can rely on that technology that they're used to and bring the libraries that they're used to being able to go and do that. So if you want to be out of the sandbox, that's a great way to do it. UWP apps will continue to work as they do.
Excellent. And we'll I have to end it on this one. I did see a bunch of great dev-specific questions come in right at the end here. Unfortunately, I think we'll have to save those for our next call due to this call ending in a minute here. But to close, Ryan, I'm seeing several viewers post asking if when WinUI 3 is finally decoupled, if we'll consider bringing it to Rust or Linux. I know you spoke to this before. Just wanted to highlight that again in case you wanted to share any thoughts on that.
Yeah, very quickly, Rust is maybe yes. It's definitely something that we hear about, not infrequently. It's not a focal point for us right now, but I think we're open to that idea. We're just trying to get some things like unpackaged and islands in and some really bread and butter stuff done first. So that might be something we could look at in the future. And in terms of Linux, we usually rely on the ecosystem built on top of WinUI 3 to go and handle cross-platform. So, we were at one point thinking about cross-platform directly for WinUI 3. I think we sort of closed that chapter probably over a year ago, maybe a year and a half ago, and said, no, we really want to focus on just being the best UI platform that we can for Windows. We're the native platform. We are the thing that most embodies Windows. That is our focus. That is our mission. And that's going to continue to be our mission probably for years. And so things that graft on top of us or alongside us, like React Native, Uno, Maui, things like that, those are the folks to talk to if you want to do cross-plat with WinUI.
Excellent. All right. Well, perfect timing. It just hit 11. So like I said, thanks all for your questions. We got a bunch of great questions right there at the end that I would have loved to have time to answer, but we'll have to save them for next month. Or if you'd like to see them answered sooner, always feel welcome to go and post it on our repo as a discussion topic. And we'll try to get you an answer there. So with that, I'll turn it over to Anna. And thanks again for joining us for the Q&A.
All right. Thanks so much to all of our question answerers. Thanks to everyone watching for asking great questions and for tuning in. We will see you next time. Thanks, guys.